Okay, our greetings are now complete, and we're getting into the formal part of the program. We've got a great day for you. Before the break, we're going to hear from a very special keynote speaker, and then we're going to have a panel, which is like the one yesterday, one of these truly extraordinary panels with world's leading thinkers, and is chaired by David Tickall, a good friend and longtime colleague of mine. But first, we're going to hear from Elfrink, who's the Executive Vice President for Industry Solutions and also what's called the Chief Globalization Officer for Cisco. You all know Cisco. Wim joined the company in 1997. In 2000, he was promoted to an SVP. And in 2006, he became this Chief Globalization Officer, and so deciding to practice what he preaches about globalization, he took his family and moved to India, to Bangalore, to establish Cisco's Globalization Center East there. And he now heads 3 of Cisco's global initiatives: Cisco's Industry Solutions, their Emerging Countries Initiative, and also Cisco's Globalization Strategy. So please welcome Wim Elfrink.
So good morning, et bonjour, monsieur and madame. That was my French for today. I have the privilege to give my presentation in English, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning. One vision for a digital society. My 40 minutes will be about the sustainability in creating digital societies. Because if you think about it, sustainability, it's all about a balance between economic, social, and environmental interests. And that's going to be the name of the game in the 21st century. Cisco has a vision. We call it, we changed the way we work, live, play, and learn. When I joined Cisco in 1997, and my mother-in-law asked me, so what are you going to do? And I said, we're going to change the way we work, live, play, and learn. And you know how mother-in-laws can look? Very skeptical. Nowadays, she understands it. She uses Skype. She's emailing, education via the web, and she's a good user. But if you look at the 21st century and what technology is going to enable, and don't be nervous. I'm not going to be a nerd. I'm not going to go too deep in technology. It's not about the technology. It's about what the technology enables, what you can do with it, and how you can make it an integrated element of everything you do and all the plans you have. And because if I can give some context for the 21st century, it will be the century that will be dominated by demographical shifts. And for the first in history, we have a tremendous change in the demography of society. Economics, and that we all agree and we know that it's all going to be about, we call it developing countries. I would say, call it new growth markets. And that we all know BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Mexico to an extent now. And we start talking about TIPS. Turkey, Indonesia, Poland, Saudi Arabia, South Africa as the next wave. For a company like Cisco, between 30 and 40% of future growth will come out of these 10 countries. And last but not least, the 21st century will be dominated about concern, global warming, energy uses. If we continue our usage patterns like we have done in the past, by 2030, we will have an increase of energy of 40%. And I'm not talking about water yet, and water usage, and that is going to be a very scarce product in the future. Let me give the context a little bit more about these demographic shifts, because I still think that is extremely underestimated in a lot of outlooks for business and environmental behavior. It's a little bit an eye chart, but I'll give you some numbers. And so we divide the world in aging, shrinking, and hypergrowth. Let me start with aging. And this is the percentage of society that will be 65 years and older by 25. So on a global level, it's going up from 7% to 16%. China is already aging. And so to feed that engine of manufacturing and development, we will run into shortages. Canada is going to 25%, your country here. I've put on the Netherlands because I'm Dutch. I'm Chief Globalization Officer, but I'm still, every 4 years with the Olympic Games or with the World Championships in soccer, I'm very, very Dutch. And people are tribal. That's also one of these things. Never forget that. And we all want to belong to a company, to a country. Montreal, as an Olympic city, was the only Olympic Games where the Netherlands had not any medals. And I still know that, right? Because that burns in. As a country at that moment said, we're going to make a plan and we're going to do it different. Japan, 40%. Think about, Disneyland. I met the CEO of the international part of Disney, and he said, Wim, all these theme parks have been developed for 2 elderly people coming with 8 children 3 times in their life. The future of these parks is that you will have 8 old people with 2 young kids. That all these attractions have to be rebuilt because we are aging and we are shrinking. And that if you look at the shrinking side, and that Europe is going down by 5% from a demographic point of view. At Germany 14, Russia 21. That means from a productivity point of view to maintain standard of living, you need 2-3% productivity improvement to just maintain standard of living. And then last but not least, hypergrowth. Countries like Nigeria going to a population almost the same as the US. India going from 1.1 billion to 1.5 billion. And so that there will be a complete different balance. One side of the world is getting younger, one side of the world is getting older, and is shrinking. So if you then talk about sustainable growth, you can imagine that you will have enormous mismatches. And supply and demand of resources are not going to work in a normal way. And to give you a couple of data facts here, that emerging countries, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, United Nations Secretary, has said the 21st century is going to be the age of urbanization. 700 million people are moving to cities. That's a number, but it's 180,000 a day. Can you imagine? We will need 2 Tokyos in the world as new cities. 100 cities of 1 million people and more have to be built. And I heard it also said before by the speakers, the future of competition is going to be between cities. It's going to be London versus Mumbai. It's going to be Melbourne to Sydney, to Brisbane. And it's not just economically, it's also going to be who will get young people to feed your economy. How do you attract talent? That are questions that we have to start answering. 50% of new building is in Asia. So a lot of innovation from city planning and urbanization will come out of China and India in the next decades. 50% of population in India and Africa has still no access to healthcare or education. 3 billion people are going to be connected to the internet. And for the first time in history or in future, there will be people in rural areas who will have access to the web before they have access to water or electricity. All kinds of new, I would say, economic patterns will emerge. Already in rural areas in India, people do video surveillance for retail stores somewhere in the world and look at behavior. And that work is coming to you. You don't go to your work. Shortage of 4 million people and 600,000, I can go on and on. But also in the developed world, that you see stimulus packages for 100 cities and more. If you think about a city like Detroit, having gone down from 1.6 million people to 700,000, how do you revitalize a city? How do you attract new talent? You have to be innovative. Otherwise, how do you attract young people? At Generation I, who is restless, who want to play, who want to be fast. 3% of buildings in the world are LEED certified. And so if we talk about energy management, 70% of worldwide energy is used in 600 cities, consumed. 60% of that in buildings. Buildings have a utilization of 40%. And so there are easy type of fixes to go to that. Unbalance in workforces. The US has a shortage already of 200,000 nurses. 2 million people who have to assist in assisted living and help in an aging society. And I can go on and on and on. And that's safety and security. So if I summarize these type of facts, the main challenges, both in developed and developing worlds, will be urbanization and energy management, will be a talent mismatch between supply and demand. The US at this moment already has 1 million shortage of manufacturing workers. Nobody wants to work in factories anymore. And that's, I'm Dutch, I'm a European, and that's STEM, you know, people who really have that type of education in science, technology, engineering and math. There's an undersupply. We already know that in the US, 1 out of 4 people of 55 and older are STEM workers who are not going to be replaced because there's no supply. There's a mismatch. And so we have to start thinking about virtualization of work, access to healthcare and education. In a sustainable society, that has to happen. And last but not least, how do we make our society safe and secure? Physically, but also more and more with, you know, ICT, cybersecurity. It's going to be one of those new buzzwords and themes in society. So I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm going to give you an idea of what technology can do. Not what technology is, but what technology can enable. And we call it the Internet of Everything. And so we have gone over the last 30 years, it's only 30 years, to seamless communication with your cell phone. You can take it everywhere you go and it works. We are now starting to approach a world and technology that everything will be connected. So 15 billion devices by 2020 will be connected. And it's physically only 99% of the world is not connected. Only 1% is connected. And so you talk about sensors, and that all kinds of equipment, even in your body, that you have to dream a little bit with me to think about it. And to give you an example, that we call it machine to machine, but it's a very abstract type of thing. And so this is an example from last week. I was in Dubai, and I had, like a lot of you probably, an early conference call. I had my alarm clock at 4:30, took a shower, was sitting for my conference call at 5 o'clock, and guess what? It was cancelled. Machine to machine would mean that if my agenda would have changed, my alarm clock would have deferred for an hour. And that are the type of things that will be possible in machine to machine. And that's so not just hardcore, but also software-driven and organic. Everything that will be connected will enable productivity. And we need productivity in aging and shrinking societies. It will create new values and services. I'll go into that a little bit more deep. And it can be green and secure if you design it that way. So one slide on technology. These are inflection points that happened over the last 30 years to make seamless communication possible. And that nowadays we phone. And this is only 30 years. And it has gone from bridge to routed, from voice and data to video. We call, by the way, video the new voice. Video is the new voice. If you talk about PCs, it's now any device. A lot of IT, CIOs are talking about BYOD, bring your own device, and it should seamlessly work. And that's a revolution of only 2-3 years old. And we start talking about smart grids, and that redesign the electric grid from siloed to connected industries, smart connected communities. And then the next phase, what we call the Internet of Everything, is going to be from independent to everything connected seamlessly. Next to that, and that's almost the perfect storm, we have these market transitions where we talk about cloud, virtualization, mobility. 20% from the workforce nowadays is mobile, and that's moving to 50% in the next decades. Collaboration, video, we go from big data to open data to apps. And there's so many new things coming together and that it's going to be a perfect storm, which can be a big element in sustainability if you integrate it in your plan. And we still see a lot of plans, whether it's a city plan, whether it's a business plan, where there is no chapter for ICT. Does it happen? It happens quicker than you think. It's only 9 years ago, almost a decade, that IP telephony didn't exist. Today, in enterprise companies, it is at 95%, and it has given 50% savings. Just as a data point to remind. Exponential growth in IP traffic. Think about it. 20 average households in the US will generate the same type of internet traffic as the entire internet in 2008. If you think about it, 1 zettabyte, all these numbers, it's what is it? But 1 zettabyte of books is a distance of 72 billion miles, or from here to Pluto 20 times. It becomes imaginary. And then devices, so that 1 minute, every second, 1 million minutes of video. It's the same what we have gone through with the PC industry. Can you remember, that's 15 years ago? Do I need a 286, a 386, an A486, a Pentium? How much memory? We don't talk about it anymore, as much as possible. And so if you plan fiber to the home or whatever, or infrastructure, think big. Are you ready for this explosion? And we still have a tendency to think too limited. I'll give you an example. Public sector first, of what technology can enable and what it can do. This is a greenfield city in Korea, Incheon, bridge to the airport, the new airport of Incheon. It's an Erythropolis, which is an economic type of unit, like the Netherlands is, like Dubai is, and like some airport type of cities are. It's built on reclaimed land. It's where General MacArthur landed in 1953 with the invasion and freedom of Korea. And it's built in a sustainable way. And that means there's waste management system underground. Most distances are walkable. And that means that everything is reachable in 10, 12 minutes. And because people walk. If it's more than 12 minutes, they go by car, or you need ground transportation. And it's a very, very sustainable city. It's our marquee project where we have inserted technology that's going to connect everything. And horizontal infrastructure. And that's going to be the new norm. It reduces cost dramatically, and it makes the city more competitive. But it's also very much sustainable. Social, economic, and environmental. And there is no, I would say, objective to live in a city that's completely green if you have no job. On the other hand, if it's a heavily polluted city, you want to go somewhere else. It's that balance. And that balance is in the Maslow hierarchy in a city, another one, than in a rural village in India, or perhaps in Africa, or a rural part of Canada. It's about that harmony, how you can achieve that between social, economic, and environmental aspects. That's the picture. And that is what I would call perfect storm. So underground, you have that one infrastructure, and above the ground, you get clouds and services and private cloud. And I'm not going in all these type of things, but what it will enable is a services society. And these two pictures bring, I think, the pitch home. On the left side, for me and for you, you see what we call an integrated operations center. And this is the Integrated Operations Center of Rio de Janeiro. And that we built it under the leadership with IBM as the big system integrator. And it brings all the utilities together. It's a what-if type of center. I was on the ground when one of the airports was closed down because of a thunderstorm. And they could reroute traffic, send children earlier to home, reroute police agents, close bridges. And that you really can get intelligence in the way you plan your city. You see consumption. You know what's going on from a traffic management point of view. There's video surveillance. And a lot of people say, Wim, now stop, because this is Big Brother watching you. But it's the other way around. Because all that data will become open data for citizens. And citizens on their cell phone, with Twitter, know earlier than oftenly government what's going on. You can also monetize all that data where you're sitting on. We call it analytics. But citizens will get access to information and to services. And so if we talk about analytics and the huge databases, data in itself is useless. It's fine. But you have to go from data to information to knowledge and then wisdom. and at what-if scenarios. And it is at fingertips at the moment to get these type of things together and to get artificial intelligence to get knowledge out. And so it's not Big Brother that's going to watch citizens, it's citizens who are going to watch government. And you see all kinds of examples of participative democracy and other tools coming up, and I'll give you some examples of that. If you look about the citizens in this city, that they will have access, and don't try to read this, but this is intellectual property. We designed more than 200 services that citizens can buy. And this is my menu if I would live in Songdo. And so, healthcare monitoring from home. 80% of doctors' calls don't need physical intervention. And more IP-enabled devices can be used for diagnostics. For blood, for urine, for stool, you can do it from home. You don't have to go, you only go to the doctor if you need physical intervention. So it will reduce traffic. It will go that far. And I think I can say that early in the morning. We're all human beings, we all go to the loo. Would you pay $5 a month to get a nutrition advice to keep you healthy for the rest of the day, depending on your metabolism of the previous evening and what you have done? Did you know that in Paris, an average citizen spends 4 years of his or her life finding a parking place? Wouldn't it be great to have parking services? Congestion can be reduced. And all these type of things will be possible with the Internet of Everything. It's a matter of time to get it designed. It's more the operationalization and the monetization that we're finding out. Access to security services, assisted living, and that all these type of things, older people staying at home longer, have a good quality of life. Telepresence, video, surveillance, enablement, and that you have to think out of the box to understand what is possible. And then on top of that, why I think that acceleration will take place, because we now have that explosion of apps. That's that new phenomena. And that's big data, open data, will be information and wisdom. If you think about it at this moment, we bring more than 100 movies a week and 250 books a week. That's coming on the market. But now, 15,000 new apps are coming up with more than 10 million downloads every day. And so open data will be an accelerator for independence of citizens. And I'll give you some examples of that. And I'm not able to forecast how fast that will go. But it's a trend, it's accelerating, and we can have a lot of benefits from that. Because you will get access to information and data and determine your own life and your own plan. Is this only for greenfield cities? No. This is, I think, one of the best examples of cities around the world. And this is Barcelona, and another Olympic city like Montreal. It has taken the last decade an approach, and urbanization was invented in Barcelona. They invented the word urbanization. And so what they have done is take a district, revitalize it, create clusters of innovation around themes, and they have been able, by providing infrastructure, to attract young people, to attract entrepreneurs working together in smart working centers. And they have a proven record to have created more than 150,000 jobs now. This slide is already getting obsolete. And they have been able to attract more than 4,500 new companies. So revitalization has the same objective as you can do in greenfield cities. Another example is, from an apps point of view, Washington. Washington had a program. It was the CIO of Obama who came up with this idea. It's apps for participation. And for a cost of $2,300, for a cost of $50,000, that there was a competition. That's the 311 type of data. 311 in the US is the data of customers who complain about things. They made it open data. And all kinds of apps developers start to come with solutions that people were able to pay some money for and get access to an irritation that they had in the city. And you see all these type of initiatives coming up and accelerating, by which People take control over their life and their destiny. Participative democracy, planning in neighborhoods, do it in a consultative, collaborative way. And that, people will take the responsibility and make a decision, but you can counsel and get input from your citizens much more easily. So the public sector will be a key element of innovation and growth. In the end, what's the bottom line? It's all fine, but this is what the bottom line is. And these are hard numbers out of city plans, where you can achieve 30% energy savings in a decade easily. Water consumption, 50% reduction. Singapore is already water neutral, from toilet to tap. I don't know whether it's the right phrase, but it's recycled. Crime rates, that if people are happier and have a better quality of life, crime rates go down. It's a statistic. And that people in history, don't forget, why did people go to cities? It was to be safe. There was a physical wall. People started to specialize in their jobs, and they started to trade. They started to go to restaurants, started to create music. So if people are happy, crime rates go down. Another thing, traffic. And that with all these virtual services, it's not this or it's not a replacement, but you get a choice. And my irritation in the US is always that, I lose my driving license at least once every 6 months at a conference, or I leave it in a hotel, or somewhere in a suit that went to the dry cleaning. The point is, why do I have to go to the DMV? It would be so simple. But all these simple things together would reduce traffic by 30% easily if you started thinking about virtualization. Also now with the clouds and all these opportunities, you can create virtual education for $3 per student per month. And why do I say that? Because for $3 per student per month, it becomes accessible in developing countries. 3 billion people have no access to healthcare or education. At technology enabled, second best, virtual classrooms, and you make price points, and you give what people is elementary need in life from a sustainability point of view in a rural village, access to healthcare and education. And then the next thing is access to work. And so the benefits are so compelling. And again, it's that balance between economic, social, and environmental. And it can be at different levels. In a rural village, it will be different than in a big city. But the competition is between cities in the future. In my home country, again, the Netherlands, 300 young people a week leave the country and go somewhere else. Our children are much more mobile than we are. So I'm 20 minutes in my presentation, and I just want to know, am I connecting? Can I? Are you with me? Are you cynical? Who is cynical and says, Wim, I don't know whether this is going to happen in the next decade? Any hands? Okay. Are you skeptical? I think you should be. But, there's buy-in. Are you with me? And, to prove my point, that this is my life. I was born on a small island in the coast of Holland, and I was, 12 years old when we got a black and white television. I've seen here people who probably has gone through the same. I was 20 years old the first time I flew in my life. And my boy was 20, days when he flew the first time. But the real point, I was 30 years old when I got a cell phone. And, when my son was 10 years, he said, Dad, I want to have a cell phone. And then I said, I think you're a little bit too young. And then he had the absolute deadly question. He said, how old were you? The discussion was over. But we are often prisoners of our own experiences. And there are people who say nobody above 40 can be innovative. And we are all, of course, exceptions here. Don't get me wrong. But we think much more in concept. I was 40 years old when I got my first VPN. A lot of people don't know what VPN is, but virtual private connectivity and safety and security. I was 50 years old with my first telepresence at home. So it's not about my age. And the point I tried to make, and this is a real picture when I lived in India, when you put children in a telepresence room, You know what they did? They don't talk about the technology. They don't talk about if this and what that. They just start playing. They have a complete, and if you look at this moment, how kids of 14, 15, 16 years old, how they live, how they work, how they play, a Generation Y as we call it, it's different. And so if you now start, about the enterprise and the future of work, and that's always get your young generation in. Listen to your kids. Get young people on your board, that they think different. We make it complicated. But if we want to really start matching supply and demand of resources and get a skilled workforce, which is sustainable, let's first start observing how our kids work, live, play, and learn. 20% of the workforce at the moment is mobile. In the past, you went to a city to your work. You agree? Nowadays, work can come to you. You can work everywhere. I don't have an office. My office is where I am. I log in, I have all my data. I can work where I am. That mobility percentage over the next decade is going from 20% to 50%. And here we have all these big buildings, clusters of experts. And that's in the past, every city around the world had that place to be. Whether it was in Paris, that with art in Montmartre, whether it was music in New Orleans, or that's in Amsterdam, the canals and the famous pubs. Every city has these where people come together and where creativity and innovation starts. And it will stay that way, but you can also extend it virtually because it's easy to get a cluster of experts discussing your issue. We call that remote experts. You will see it in healthcare. You will see it in the financial, that you can have an expert in every city or village out of a centralized pool. It's in the, I made that classic mistake. I love to run and I sport, and I lived in India. I went to the doctor in the US to do an MRE of my knee, and I asked him, I said, can I come to discuss it tomorrow because I have to fly back to India. You know what he said? You can discuss it over there because that's where it's analyzed. You have to start thinking in that virtualization, spontaneous collaboration. Whether you do it via social networking or you can form your own cluster. So work is going to fundamentally change. And this is, and a lot of things happen with the coffee machine or the water cooler. But in the future, if you are at the water cooler and you meet people, or at the coffee machine, at the same time you can meet people virtually in other offices around the world. And at the moment, it's just a screen, but believe me, a decade out, it will be a wall, a video wall. And you will have transparent communication between offices in Sydney, in Mumbai, in Montreal, in wherever. And it will be integrated, it will be designed in. And if you say, I don't know, I'm skeptical, and like I said, 12 years old with a black and white, it will happen. And probably in 20 years from now, it will be three-dimensional. And so it gives all kinds of opportunities to start thinking out of the box in long-range planning. Amsterdam, that we pioneered smart working centers, where we now have clusters of people, young entrepreneurs sitting together. And the future is small and medium businesses. The clusters, the big companies with the small ones. It will be ecosystems. But if you see that savings 40%, 10 million euros in leasing costs, utilization of buildings is going up, that carbon emission is less, usage of equipment. Another compelling is that concept is now in France, is in Korea, and that we call it mobile, social, visual, and virtual. Because it's also, from a diversity point of view, it will have childcare centralized and located and combined, and to have women easy entrance in the workforce. But if you see in Korea, and this is a white paper, hardcore material, and 450 smart working centers by 2015, 1.3 billion savings in transits and 1.1 million tons of carbon emission. That's an equivalent of 20,000 cars off the road. 20,000 cars off the road. That's substantial. And all these type of things are already in reach. So if you look at the enterprise, ICT. And the questions for CIOs now are not just, what are you doing from an application point of view, but it's like voice. 10 years ago, you had a CIO and you had a voice team. It's now one. It's one integrated infrastructure. And the same will happen at the CIO, that how can you improve the utilization of your building from 40% to 70? Save energy. What are you doing for energy efficiency? How do you not only enable cybersecurity, but also physical security with video surveillance? It all runs on an intelligent network, one infrastructure. So in master planning, take all these type of elements in your integrated plan. For country transformation in Africa and India, what can technology do? We talk about broadband, and we know that every 10% increase of broadband has a 1.2 correlation in GDP. But broadband is fine, but what are you going to do with it? You need that vision. And this is one of my pilot cities, proof of concept in India that we built when I lived there. And that after a flood where more than 100,000 people lost their homes, and we rebuilt a village with 3,000 houses, and we had an integrated plan with ICT, and we provided virtual healthcare, virtual education. And then we have documented this, and we see now a more sustainable contrast, and there are a lot of numbers here, but GDP is going up. Normally, kids of 16 years and older leave their village because there's no future. Now they have virtual access to healthcare and education. And the parents in the evening go to crop training. And that you see marketplaces, you get economic cycles. It also eliminates a lot of middlemen, and by that corruption. And so it has a lot of benefits. And India has 600,000 villages, and like I showed you in my opening slide, 400,000 have no teachers. And they will never get it, because nobody wants to live in these villages with an education or doctors. And so you make it virtually accessible, and you form clusters. The same what we are doing in Jordan. It's a CRS initiative to make clusters of hospitals, and where you get specialist support in remote hospitals virtually online. Another example here is Kenya, an initiative that we took with the Clinton Foundation. And we have so many proof of concepts. It's now a matter, how are we going to scale this? But sustainability, technology enabled, is in hand reach. In Cisco, we manage what we call the biggest virtual classroom in the world. It's live, up and running. And we call that network academies, where we give people a better chance of employability by training them in certifications. We have 1 million students online every day. Since inception, we have trained more than 4 million people, and 98% found a job because they're very employable and they can certify and recertify. So back to my opening slide, and I said 200,000 nurses shortage in the US. Why? Because there are a lot of women who can't find the time with kids and to go to the city to be recertified. But you can recertify it virtually and online. And so the whole mismatch, the future of work, think in flexibility in smart working centers, and not just in cities, but also rural areas, and create communities and see where work can best be done, make it an integrated plan. So in closing, I want to give you a couple of thoughts. That whole Internet of Everything, it's not about the technology, it's what the technology can enable. But what it needs is a thinking, an open mind thinking, that it's a new industry. And so we need visionary leadership. A little bit of skepticism is healthy, but don't be cynical. And have that open mind, invite your children on the table and look how they work, live, play, take that input. The industry, companies like Cisco, like Intel, we have that responsibility to create global open standards and not to be too proprietary. And that's the beauty in cell phone telephony, and I think is the living example of a technology that is now global available. If we want to do the same in electricity, you know, we can't even standardize on a plug in the world. And as global travelers, you know, I always have all my... So standardization will take a while. And we have 110 volts, and perhaps we will get 5 global standards. But it's better than at the moment 286 protocols. Smart regulation. Policies. I always give the example, you know, I have 2 sons, they are now 13 and 16. And probably you recognize that they never switch off the light. You agree? You know that with teenagers? And I've tried everything, you know. I gave them visibility, and you know, when they leave the house, we have a dashboard, and they still, you know, just ignore it. Now I give them 50% of the savings in pocket money. And guess what? They switch off the light. And that with smart regulation, and that get incentives for waste management, and that policymakers here around the table. A lot of our policies are, you know, from 20, 30 years ago, from an agriculture type of content. And we can be water neutral, and then regulation tells you that you have to have a water tank in the ground. You know, fire prevention, that I have a digital system in my house, but I need analog to get assured. Assurance doesn't recognize the digital laws yet. And I can go on, but to create this new industry, also public-private partnerships. A lot of mayors always laugh my pitch and say that's fantastic. 30% saving here, safer city, greener, you know, that the citizens are happy. But I have to be re-elected in 4 years. How do I do that? But you can start creating funds. You can create public-private partnerships. And it's one of my cities in my home country, Eindhoven, has been elected last year as the smartest neighborhood. They are good in creating platforms, in creating public-private partnerships with people. And last but not least, we have to form new ecosystems. And collaboration is going to be key. If we can get this off the ground with leadership teams like we have here together, and we make it an effort, we can really create a better sustainable future for ourselves and our children. Thank you very much.